Hi, I'm Dana Stevens, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest, Denzel and Spike Remix a Classic edition. It's Wednesday, August 27th, 2025, and this week we're going to be discussing, first off, Weapons, the horror thriller directed by Zach Kreger that's become one of the surprise hits of the summer. Then we'll move on to another movie, Highest Lowest, the new Spike Lee joint that marks the director's first collaboration with Denzel Washington since Inside Man in 2006. It's an adaptation of a 1963 thriller directed by Akira Kurosawa, but Spike, of course, takes many liberties with that text. We'll get into it. And finally, performative masculinity. Do these two words put together mean anything? Is this a genuine sociocultural trend? Or is the New York Times simply trying to make fetch happen with its recent article on the phenomenon of straight men who dress up and carry props to play the part of sensitive feminist dreamboats whom women will want to date? To be discussed. All right, well, we have a special panel today, not just the three of us, salty dogs who've been hosting this show since 2009, but a fourth host who's someone I think of as a Culture Gabfest all-timer who seems to be on the show in spirit even when he's not here in the room as he is with me right now. And I think you are out there probably listening to us and maybe talking back to your podcast catcher, Wesley Morris.
Hi. I can't believe I'm a fourth person on this show.
Are we going to say the occasion of Wesley's coming on the show?
Well, do you mean to celebrate his own new podcast at the New York Times?
Yes, I have a show. It's called Cannonball at the New York Times. But I mean, even if I didn't have that, and I'd still be here talking to you anyway. If you had me, if you wanted to have me on, I would just come anyway.
So, yes, although he's downplaying it, Wesley does have a great new podcast on the New York Times called Cannonball, which, by the way, is a great title for a podcast. Whoever came up with that.
It was me and my boyfriend. He started it, and I picked up what he put down and was like, wait. This might actually work. And it did.
And of course, as always, I am joined from LA by Julia Turner, a fellow at the Annenberg School of Journalism. Hello, Julia.
Hi, Dana. Hello, everyone.
And remotely, we're joined by critic Stephen Metcalf. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Dana.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Apple Card takes privacy seriously. It's your card, your info, your business. So if your credit card isn't Apple Card, maybe it should be. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com.
At Sierra, you'll always find apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. But right now it's clearance time, so you can save even more on everything you need to get active and outside. Visit your local Sierra store today.
All right, let's dig in, first of all, with Weapons. At 2:17 in the morning, one night in the quiet suburban town of Maybrook, 17 third graders wake up, get out of bed, run out their front doors, and disappear into the night. As it turns out, all 17 of these children were part of the same elementary school class. Only one of their classmates, a quiet little boy named Alex, shows up for school the next day. In the investigation that ensues, the townspeople's suspicion first focuses on the teacher of that third grade class, a relatively new arrival in town, Justine Gandy, played by Julia Garner. The movie begins with a section titled Justine, in which we witness events from her point of view. That's the first of 6 separate POV sections that will each be named for a different character, including the father of one of the children who's disappeared, played by Josh Brolin, the school's principal, played by Benedict Wong, and a beat cop who's also an ex-boyfriend of Justine's, played by Alden Ehrenreich. As these and others each respond in different ways to the trauma of the kid's disappearance, the residents of Maybrook, along with the audience, begin to piece together the fact that something very evil is afoot in their town. Let's listen to a scene from Weapons. Here you'll hear Julia Garner's voice. Her character is addressing a school meeting at which the furious parents of the vanished children are present. She nervously comes to the podium to address them.
I just want to say how very sorry I am for all of what's happened. I know there's nothing I can say to make this better. The truth is that I want an answer just as bad as all of you. I love those kids. And I know it's not.
Be locked up until she tells us what happened.
All right, Julie, I'm going to start here with you because you're the person who's the most scared of scary movies, and you resisted doing Weapons last week, but it's become such a phenomenon, and we all wanted to talk about it this week because it just seems to be a divisive movie, a surprisingly successful movie, one of those movies that just seizes the audience in a way that wasn't necessarily predictable from, the stars, the director. It's not as if this was a done deal that it would do super well. Although Zach Cregger's first film, Barbarian, also a kind of low-budget horror movie, also did surprisingly well upon its release, making this into, a script that everybody wanted. What did you think of Weapons, first of all? Were you scared? And was it worth it?
On the parochial question of the scariness meter, this is a tolerable movie for scaredy cats, in part because the horror is more conceptual than visceral, and in part because with each of those chapters you describe, the tension valve gets torqued, and then whoop, you release back to the beginning of another character's story, and you also learn a little bit about where it's likely to go. So just for the pure scaredy cat question, the interestingness of this made me not mad at you that you made me see it by the time I finished it. I will also say my favorite thing about it is how committed it is to its particularities and oddness. Like, the characters in it feel very specific and real and not just functionaries in a horror plot. And that almost seems like the point. Like, the horrible thing that's happening is just like, it's a problem that's added to the real problems of their lives, their alcoholism, their peculiarity, their sweet relationships, their junk food habits, whatever. Like, they've got a lot of texture for characters in a film like this. There is a moment where the film seems like it's going to be an allegory for gun violence in America. In what other circumstance do dozens of children disappear all at once from a community, causing them to collapse onto each other in recrimination and rage? And the part of me that doesn't love horror movies for the horror's sake got really intrigued at that moment of thinking, like, oh my gosh, is this going to be one of those important horror movies that has interesting things to say about the world? Is this going to be like Get Out, where I feel like, oh, I was scared, but for a purpose? And I feel like my answer is like, maybe no. Like, maybe the gun violence stuff is just kind of a nice dash of paprika in the stew or something. I'm very curious whether you guys think this movie has a point to make, but I would not say that it needs to have had one to be a really interesting time at the movies, and something that makes me very excited to see whatever Zach Cregger does next.
I had a great time watching this. I love a movie that hits that like visceral core of your like your stomach, where you're not nauseated by anything. You're just you're terrified. The dread factor. I've seen this movie twice, and the first time I saw it, my dread was completely engaged, my sense of dread. And the way that I didn't know anything about the movie. Nothing. I knew who made it. I knew what Barbarian was. I didn't know who was in the movie. I knew Julia Gardner was in the movie because I'd seen a trailer, and she's the only recognizable person in the trailer. It looks like Josh Brolin at the parents' at the school meeting, and it turns out Chapter 2 is Josh Brolin's chapter. I was really curious about what the allegory was going to turn out to be. I think I've got Sinners on the brain, so that anytime you get an original screenplay that is also a horror movie right now, you just think, what is this amounting to? Where is this going? What is it subtext? I think this movie has one, but I also think it doesn't. We can talk about that, but I think that there's a moment where Josh Brolin has this dream, and in the dream he is following his child having fled from the house, which he's obsessed with, figuring out like what do all these cameras add up to. And part of his dream, there's a giant AK-47 with a digital alarm clock on it, hovering above the house in question, which we can talk a little bit more about too.
The gun is hovering above his own house.
Oh, is that his house? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He runs back around in the dream to his own house.
Oh, right. That's even deeper. Okay, Steven.
Oh, I'm with you, Wesley. I loved this movie. It took a hold of me almost immediately. At first, I thought, okay, the opening scene is little rote. This teacher who happens to be the homeroom teacher of the kids who've disappeared is getting, berated. Non-linear turned out to be the perfect way to tell it. I think that can be gimmicky. Here, actually, it's a brilliant strategic choice and thematic choice, because this movie is, in addition to being a superbly delivered horror movie in which I screamed out loud several times. I have no idea what Julia is referring to. This was as scary a movie as I've seen in a decade. But it's the story also of the atomization effects of grief upon a community, and how the pre-existing kinds of loneliness and social violence in the community only redouble the grief, right? It's a grief that feeds on grief that feeds on grief, and that this community is in that cycle. And so telling these stories in an atomized way, I thought was very effective, both from a genre point of view, but from a kind of deeply meaningful one, thematic one as well. And I thought the movie's called Weapons for a reason. I actually thought the one moment in the entire movie that didn't work was the AK image. I thought that the movie didn't need that in some sense, and it pointed the way to a simplistic allegory that everything else about the movie transcended. The specter of all kinds of violence hovers over the entire film. It's called Weapons for a reason. I think there is a weapon of various kinds in each one of the segments. Like, some are quite obvious. There's the AK in that segment. There's the cop who asks repeatedly to the drug addict, like, do you have a weapon on you? Do you have a weapon on you? That word is repeated, and the ways in which that person does is thematically important to the film. And the other thing I'd just say very quickly is that, without giving anything away, what gives a witch her power is that she takes key tinctures of a person. She has this esoteric secret knowledge of the thing that you take from a person, that little tincture, and then you turn it into a brew, and you gain a kind of unusual amount of power over the natural world. This movie is a work of filmcraft as witchcraft. It takes this tincture of each one of the people that it's about and shows you their vulnerability to certain kinds of violence, recrimination, and social violence. I think this is a terrific movie.
Me gusta.
All right, well, I guess I'm going to be the only outlier who has any reservations about this movie. I was hoping that somebody else would join me in some expression of something other than approbation. So I think I agree with Sam Adams of Slate about this movie. He wrote a great piece about the ending specifically, which we won't get into in this segment, but we are going to do a Slate Plus bonus segment specifically on the ending of Weapons, because it is one of those movies that a full discussion really requires some spoilage. So I won't get into any of that, but I will read a little bit of Sam's review that I think goes with some of my reservations about the movie. But wait, I want to start out by saying that the reverse of Steve, I thought that this movie started out really strong. And for the first, especially for the Julia Garner character POV section, the first, half hour, 40 minutes of the movie or something, I really thought this is a rare horror movie that does exactly what Julia was talking about, like has characters that have some texture and some characteristics, and there's something else besides heroes or villains or, food for the monster to come and eat. And Julia Garner's character specifically was just this like wonderfully messy person who seems like a really good and ethical teacher, but she's also a total mess in her private life. And all of those characteristics kind of work against her in her attempt to investigate the school children's disappearance. And I feel like the movie kind of lost that texture in a way, and people did become monster food in the last half hour or so. I just found the revelation really unscary, which we can get into in the bonus segment. But let me read a little bit from Sam's piece, which is not a pan of the movie at all, but it's an investigation of why he doesn't think it goes as far as it could in investigating the kind of larger implications of its horror. He says, that isolation, i.e. the isolation of the 6 different POVs, that isolation also undermines Weapons' resonance. Kreger stages so many of his scenes with just 2 or 3 characters that we never see what's happening to Maybrook as a whole. The crowd at the parents' meeting remains a shapeless mass, and we never get a sense of how the other still full classrooms are reckoning with the absence of their fellow students. The isolation is spooky, but it feels artificial. And then skipping ahead, Sam says that Kreger doesn't take into account how collective devastation, whether it's a mass shooting, a deadly pandemic, or the death of something more abstract like democracy or faith, differs from individual loss, how it can spread trauma to those with no direct connection to the event, and therefore no clear-cut way to articulate or deal with it. I especially felt toward the end that there was no clear sense. It doesn't need to be, elevated horror and necessarily represent something allegorically in a perfect one-to-one fashion, but to feel like there's something more going on than, oh, well, this one really bad thing happened to these people in this particular place. And when that is resolved at the end, to the extent it is, there is a sort of lack of catharsis that I think is intentional. I'm not saying that there has to be perfect catharsis, but in the end, I sort of felt like, is this just about one freaky thing that happened in this one place? Like, why did I go through all of that emotion?
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, the interpretation that it's not just an excuse for a good time at the movies is, so it isn't actually an allegory. And I agree with you, Steve, that tonally the gigantic AK or maybe it's an AR-15 in the sky is kind of like obvi in a way that the rest of the movie is not, and a little weird, almost red herring-y. And it's almost like he had to point up, like, you might think this is about guns. Sure, think that if you want. But maybe the ultimate bad that we'll get to in our spoiler is essentially just an excuse to contemplate what happens in individual threads when evil comes to town. And I actually think the lack of the collective response is the point. Nobody ever gets to the collective response because they get so trapped and stuck in their own needs and their own response, and how the evil and the grief it causes, or the bad and the grief it causes, like, gets gnarled up in all of their own particularities. So I don't know, maybe that's what there is of the film. I still think it doesn't totally lift off.
There was something about the Justine segment that I loved especially, and it had so much to do with Julia Garner's performance, because she did that astonishing thing that an actress does, which she shows you one side of a person, which is her public face, especially post-tragedy, vis-a-vis the community of parents, right? Which is like a deeply suppressed, super careful,
almost political,
right? Political, like wary of misspeaking, to a necessary but also pathological degree. And then the scene in the bar where she meets the cop with whom she has a highly developed flirtation, and you see this super, like, kind of low-key charismatic, incredibly sexy, alluring, playful, manipulative, yes, exactly, funny human being, and it's like such a dimensional performance, right? And you're like, oh, she was this unidimensional thing in scene one because she had to be for that context, and then she showed, all of a sudden she's in 3D or 12D, and you're like, I just want to watch an entire movie about her. So I mourned her disappearance from the middle parts of the film.
I agree. I think that there's that moment where she goes even before the bar, she goes and buys 2 giant bottles of vodka. And I don't know. I just was like, okay, I don't know who this person is, but I'm down to follow them wherever they. And also, I didn't know about the chapters, so I thought we'd spend most of the movie with her.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the whole movie. Would be
and isn't it a little bit disappointing that she does become less textured?
No, I loved it. I don't think she becomes less textured. I just think there are other textures to explore, and hers is one you remember because it's surprising the number of notes that she and the writing can allow for that character to have.
The writing in the first hour, like I said, is really, really excellent. It really is starting to build up this extended cast of characters. And I will maintain until my dying day, as I am summoned out of the house at 2:17 a.m. by mysterious forces, that the last half hour doesn't hold up to that first hour.
I think the dread of it does.
Right. Well, clearly we have a lot more to say about weapons, but luckily we have another 10 minutes or so in which to say it in our bonus segment. So it's time to smash that subscribe button, like and subscribe, so you can hear the rest of our weapons conversation.
Smash it.
All right, well, as summer winds down, refreshing your wardrobe with staple pieces for the season ahead is clutch. It's totally clutch. Quince nails it with luxe essentials that feel effortless and look polished, perfect for layering and mixing. You'll find yourself reaching for them again and again. Dana, I have to throw to you here. It's almost like we do a Quince segment every week now, which we're delighted to do. Talk to me. What's your latest?
Yeah, I wanted to be the you this time and get to be the person who talks about a Quince piece because I have a new one, and it's a lovely summer dress that I wish I'd gotten earlier in the summer. I actually had the very rare experience of being complimented by my daughter on a garment that I was wearing instead of the usual, like, that needs a belt, or like, that doesn't flatter you. Her fashion feedback tends to have some sort of like critical element, and this was a rare, like, you look fantastic, I love that dress, you should wear it much more often. It's called the 100% European linen fit and flare midi dress. Julia, I just put a link to it in the chat so you can look at it and help me describe it, but it's this great kind of 50s silhouette, like a really full skirt that actually has an underskirt and then a square neck.
Ooh, and it's on big sale right now.
Oh, is it? Maybe I'll have to get another color. You're right.
It looks great. I cannot improve upon your description, other than it looks like it has some cute shirring on the back panel, which I bet makes it flattering on people of different shapes and sizes.
All right. Well, this is just the easiest sell in the world for us on this show. We love your products, Quince. Elevate your fall wardrobe essentials with Quince. Go to quince.com/culture for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culture to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culture. Now is the moment in our podcast where we talk about business. First, we have to tell you about our bonus episode this week, which is available only to Slate Plus subscribers. This week, we're going to spoil the movie Weapons, whose ending, I think, controversial, maybe putting it a little strongly, but it's certainly fodder for an interesting extension of our conversation with Wesley Morris, the New York Times, great New York Times critic, will also be joining us for the Plus segment. If you're listening to this feed, it might mean that you are not yet a Slate Plus subscriber. I very strongly disapprove of this choice. Slate Plus offers a host of benefits, including ad-free versions of the show, a bonus episode every week. For this and a bunch of other Slate podcasts, and of course, the opportunity to read as much as you like on slate.com without hitting a paywall. It's also the opportunity to support Slate generally, and our show in particular. I just want to say, just completely sincerely, this is a huge part of our ability to keep this show up and running, the lights on, our voices yakking and gabbing in your ears. So it does mean a lot to us materially, but also in all the other obvious ways to have listeners do this. So to sign up for Slate Plus, get those bennies, you can go to slate.com/culture plus. And if you sign up there, you give us a little boost as the people who wooed you over. So again, it's slate.com/culture plus. Okay, let's go back to the show.
All right, moving on to our second movie this week. It's a 2-movie week, which makes me happy. First of all, some numbers involved in the working relationship between Spike Lee and Denzel Washington. They first collaborated no fewer than 35 years ago on Mo Better Blues in 1990. They've made 5 movies together since then, including the highly acclaimed Malcolm X, maybe one of Spike Lee's masterpieces, certainly one of his greatest collaborations with Denzel. Now, for the first time since Inside Man in 2006, Washington and Lee are working together again in a big, sprawling, ambitious movie that's a remake, a very loose remake that Lee has compared to a jazz interpretation of an Akira Kurosawa classic, High and Low, from 1963. Denzel plays David King, a record executive who you might say is in the tradition of like a modern-day Quincy Jones, or as you guys were saying on your Cannonball episode about this movie, maybe a little bit of a Puffy.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
He's essentially a guy who at the beginning of this century, like around the turn of into the 21st century, started discovering all kinds of huge stars. And he's become this celebrity in his own right as a record producer who finds Grammy winners, digs up treasures. He is sort of a force in Black culture, as we understand, but one who is a little bit in his Lion in Winter phase and seems to be losing some of the mojo that he used to have for his career as the movie begins. We meet David King high, right? The movie is called Highest to Lowest, and it is actually about...
he couldn't be higher.
It's about ascent and descent and the different layers of of New York City life. And so we first see Denzel at the David King at the top of the world. He's in Dumbo in his high rise. He lives in a penthouse on the top floor. He's having a high stakes phone conversation on his balcony. Here, I'm going to throw to you, Wesley. Can you describe what is the position David King is in business wise as the movie begins?
I'm probably going to get the details wrong, but basically he started a record label. Record label got huge. And now, all these years later, it needs like some bigger music industry force wants to acquire it. So they're on the verge of basically making this huge deal for acquisition. But Denzel wants to find the money to buy back the label and keep it in his name and not take this huge deal that his co-shareholders or, the board of the label or his fellow executives are like, are you crazy? We want this money. Let's do it. And he's trying to convince them to basically forego this sale in order to keep the label and keep it real, to like keep making music that matters because they know that he suspects that this conglomeration, this buyout is going to compromise the music.
He's having this very stressful day already, right? Leveraging all of his assets. He's going to mortgage his second home. He's going to put everything on the line to save Stackin' Hits, the record label that he started all these years ago. But just as in the Kurosawa movie, the day quickly gets more complicated because after we've been introduced to this character and a few surrounding characters, including his wife, played by Ilfanesh Hadera, and his driver, longtime best friend,
ballet,
sort of, body man. Like, I don't even know what you want to call him. He's played by Jeffrey Wright. His name is Paul. And he's sort of a member of the household who is like a member of the family, but also an employee of the Denzel character. We get introduced to all these folks. And then Denzel gets a second phone call, a very fateful one, telling him that his son, his teenage son, who we met earlier going off to basketball practice with his friend, has been kidnapped. But in a twist, we soon figure out. And then forces are mobilized. Denzel agrees to pay is it 17.5 million? That's the number. Yeah.
Swiss francs.
In Swiss francs, there's a whole elaborate scheme for how he will pay it. And just after he's agreed to make this payment, Trey, his son, who he thinks has been kidnapped, shows up at the apartment. And it turns out that it was actually a mistaken kidnapping of Paul's son, the Jeffrey Wright character, the chauffeur. His son, who was also at basketball practice, has instead been kidnapped by mistake. So first we get the moral quandary.
Shouldn't have got that chopped cheese. That's what happens when you go and get that chopped cheese. Somebody's going to take you.
You got to stay at basketball practice, boys. But all right, so that's the moral quandary that David King, Denzel, then finds himself in. Do I pay all of this money and leverage all of my assets and risk everything for this other kid, right? All right, I'm going to throw it out to you all, but first let's listen to a clip. This is from one of the later phone calls that David King, Denzel's character, has with the kidnapper, whose identity we don't yet know and he doesn't yet know. We haven't seen them. They're just a voice on the phone, but it's going to turn out to be none other than the real-life rapper A$AP Rocky.
Okay, relax.
Very Pacino.
Hello.
King David. Now ain't this son?
Sorry?
I got your full attention now, huh? You finally listening to me.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Good.
You know you got the wrong boy, right?
Yeah, so I've heard. And I also learned you can never trust the help. But luckily for me, it was never about the boy. It was always about you.
Well, fair enough, but if it's about me, then you can't expect me to pay $17.5 million for somebody else's son if it's about me.
Well, then his blood is gonna be on your hands then. How you want it?
No, man, come on now.
Nigga, this ain't no fucking negotiation. This a day of reckoning. You're not God no more, nigga. I am.
All right, listen. God give you everything you want, right? No, God give you everything you need. So the question is, what do you need? How can I help you? I ain't saying I'm God, but I can help.
Okay, Wesley, I'm going to start with you because you and Vincent Cunningham on your podcast, Cannonball, had such a good conversation about this movie. I don't want you to recap what you guys talked about because our listeners should go there and hear that conversation too. But I want to hear you on David King, the character that Denzel is playing, who seems to be, in a way, a Denzel autoportrait. Of course, always a Spike Lee autoportrait as well. It's this guy who was this huge cultural force who's now kind of reckoning with his legacy. And he goes on, after this second conversation with A$AP Rocky, to have this really great solo scene in his office. And I wanted you to talk about that scene.
There's a moment in his office where he's trying to figure out what to do. And instead of figuring out which painting to sell, he's like, in the most absolute sense, do I just even bother with this whole transaction? Do I spend this money to get this kid back? It's just a great scene of just too much. He is trying to figure out, like, what do I do? Tell me what to do. I mean, this is just so hard. Like, and there are these framed portraits in the office of Aretha Franklin, Jimi Hendrix, James Brown, and Stevie Wonder. And at various points in this soliloquy, this kind of like meandering self-interrogation, he's not talking to God. He's talking to the gods, right? Stevie, what should I do? Aretha, what should I do? And at some point, he takes two of his own portraits, like from magazines, I believe, and he makes them talk to each other about what he should do. And it's just, I don't think there's another actor who is capable of pulling off this ridiculousness with the kind of seriousness of purpose. I mean, the thing that Vincent and I are talking about in this conversation is the like very Shakespearean nature of what is happening here. It is not Shakespeare, but it is definitely from the people who brought you some. I just feel like the part of the fun of this movie is the lengths that Spike and Denzel are willing to go to like manufacture desperation by calling upon the ancestors to make what is ultimately just a phone call to your accountant to figure out like how viable this is.
Can I venture a question,
Oh,
though?
of course.
Does Denzel pull it off?
Oh!
Does Denzel pull it off? Like, first of all,
Team Julia.
I gotta start and say, I really enjoyed this movie. Like, it is Spike Lee having fun in New York, shit-talking my people from Boston and their sports allegiances, making sport of the Puerto Rican Day Parade, soaring music, Oklahoma, this gorgeous apartment. I mean, I would just watch like still shots of this apartment with no
It's
plot
too much.
for hours. It's hilarious. And I like had a good time at this movie, had a good time watching these two legends have a good time together. Like on some level it works. But I just found myself wondering, did Denzel always used to do this much? Like he
You mean
did
as an
so much in
actor?
Gladiator.
The too muchness
Yeah, like
of it?
the moving, the ticks, he's rolling, he's punching, he's like it's in no respect a quiet performance.
No, it's
And
completely
I feel like
undisciplined, which is kind of...
and in Gladiator 2, he's also like
Yeah, same.
rolling, rocking and rolling scene to scene
But
back
he's
and
such a
forth. And I
scene
was
stealer
like,
in Gladiator 2. He's the only thing that makes the
I
movie
know.
watchable.
Well, I wish I had seen the whole movie where that character made more sense. But then I kind of felt like he was Gladiator 2ing it up a little bit in this
Yeah.
movie, and I
Agreed.
seriously submit to Denzel pull it off.
I didn't say it was like, I'm not saying give him the Oscar. I'm just like, you couldn't ask, Spike Lee couldn't ask another actor to do something this ridiculous, have them do it, and have it at least be extremely interesting and worth talking about.
Like, wait, Wesley, about this big Denzel, did I hear you say he's doing Al Pacino as we were coming into the
Oh,
clip?
well, there's that moment where he's about to take the call from the kidnapper, and he has this moment where he is saying to the cops, you know, he should be like, all right, I got it. But instead he's like, I got it. I know. Let me, and he's doing it in slow motion too. Like, he's like, I got this.
That is a weird moment.
And it's just such a Pacinoism.
I just feel like these last two Denzel performances and late Pacino has been brewing in my mind.
Oh no, you're great to point that out. Like,
Shaggy.
yeah, I mean, the lack of discipline.
Fun to watch, but big.
Undisciplined Denzel is really interesting. It doesn't work as acting. It kind of works as some kind of channeling experience. Like you're watching a seance take place of some kind, and that is more interesting to me than the question of whether or not Denzel is good in this scene.
I mean, I'm very with you, Wesley. The funny thing is but I couldn't get over he's got maybe $200+ million worth of art on his wall. The apartment itself is probably a $20, $30, $40 million apartment. You know, you might even you don't even have to produce the money liquidly. You could get it as a a bridge loan and probably insure against its loss. Like the mechanics of the movie are just so hopelessly poorly constructed. And whether it's intentional or unintentional because of that, right? You both want people to lose themselves in the sumptuousness of his success. At the same time, you want to set up something that feels like it might be a meaningful dilemma. But in fact, what you do is you produce a human being who appears to be a monster, right? Like, is that intentional? Like, I couldn't even figure that out. This movie is so muddled. Is like, am I supposed to think because he is a monster? Objectively, he's a monster. He's not actually really tormented about this decision. Really, ultimately, like the fact that he would even give it a second to consider is preposterous. So. All of that rendered the movie completely dramatically inert. In fact, quite alienating to me. I just didn't think it was interesting. I didn't think it works as a thriller either. Here's one thing I'd throw out there, though. To me, this movie absolutely works. Not just works, but your pulse quickens. Your eyes are suddenly glued to the screen. The people you're watching the movie with are suddenly dead still. That moment in a movie theater when you sense everyone is with you in being locked onto the screen is every time A$AP Rocky's voice or actual presence is in the movie. And then high and low suddenly have a real meaning. And the confrontation between someone who's absolutely at the top and someone who, in some respects, arguably is absolutely at the bottom, as a dialectic involving Black men in an age of wealth inequality, not to mention how fucking good A$AP Rocky is in that part. Suddenly that movie is alive and it's 5 minutes of the whole fucking movie. And that's, I'd love to hear everyone speak to that dialectic just for a minute, because I couldn't ultimately figure out, like, what is the movie saying about it? I still got lost in the thematics of it, but not the dramatics of it to me were thrilling, absolutely thrilling. So I'm just curious what other people experienced there.
I agree that A$AP Rocky is great. That whole final confrontation, I don't quite know what it means, the sets of choices that Denzel ends up making about the questions the movie raises about what the successful Black Titan owes the young Black man on the come up.
Yeah, it's really hard to see how Spike Lee is positioning himself in relation to the A$AP Rocky character and what he represents.
Yeah, there's just like an old crankness to it.
It's really conservative.
The spine of it is kind of cranky. And yet Spike Lee's like camera and grasp of the world is capacious enough that it also lets us fall in love with A$AP Rocky at the same time and see that Denzel Washington's character, it like at once is too honest to be fully inside the perspective where David King is the hero. And thank goodness he did all the things he did at the end. And yet it's a little caught up in that perspective too, in a way that makes it seem kind of muddy.
All right, well, we need to wrap on this movie, unfortunately. But since we haven't mentioned it at all, Wesley, I have to hear you for 1 second on what you consider one of the worst endings to any Spike Lee movie.
Do you guys agree?
The musical segment that follows the kind of plot resolution.
Oh yeah,
what the fuck?
Terrible.
There's a full musical performance after sort of all the tension has left the narrative, and we know what happened to everyone in the crime story.
After highly symbolically repudiating hip hop,
Yes.
right?
Yes. We get this performance of just like sub Mariah Carey Visions of Love era of just
I have to unmute my microphone to laugh audibly at that description.
It's like the worst moment from the Cosby Show that never happened, right? Like everything about the music on the Cosby Show was just a pleasure, right? And there is like a real, Vincent and I in our conversation on Cannonball, we're talking about like the Bill Cosby of this movie, and the like, Black conservatism of it.
Yeah, the pull your pants up of it all.
Yeah.
The finger wagging.
Yeah. And it's not like this woman is singing. She's not doing Aretha. She's not doing Motown. She's not doing Gladys. Like, in what world in 2025's marketplace is anything coming out of her mouth or through that piano in any way viable?
Maybe the brilliant ending is his little tiny business is about to fail because he's so deluded.
Oh, interesting.
And we're all supposed to know that performance is deeply mid. And he and his rich wife are about to drive themselves off that penthouse balcony and lose all their money.
And that's the plot of Highest 3 Lowest.
All right, Dana, you're done for the year. Give her all the money now.
All right. Well, are we saying that we'll send people to see it anyway because it's Denzel and
It's still
Spike?
worth seeing. It's still worth seeing.
Absolutely.
I totally
I mean, it's
enjoyed
ridiculousness.
Despite all of these
part
quibbles, I
of the
enjoyed it.
fun.
Thumbs down.
Oh, Steve's not sending people there. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see what our listeners think. And if you do see it and you've got more to add to our big, sprawling Spike Lee and Denzel-sized conversation, write us at culturefest@slate.com.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Did you know Apple Card is designed to help you pay off your balance faster with smart payment suggestions? And because fees don't help you, Apple Card doesn't have any. So if your credit card isn't Apple Card, maybe it should be. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA Salt Lake City branch. Variable APRs range from 18.24% to 28.49% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of July 1st, 2025. Terms and more at applecard.com.
All right, for our third topic, we're talking about something that's a somewhat vague concept to grasp, but I think I can outline it here briefly. It is that there has been a recent, on TikTok, on social media, and actually in real life, in some in-person lookalike contests, one that recently took place in San Francisco, another in Seattle. There has been this trend among young people of, I guess, ironizing, satirizing, lampooning the, quote, performative male. The performative male being, in this definition, a straight man who is trying to get women by performing his feminism, I guess. So the cliches that we're looking at are like a guy is sitting around, I don't know, in sandals and he's reading bell hooks in a cafe and drinking a matcha latte. These are the signifiers I'm drawing from these contests
He's
and these
got
articles.
a tote bag with a ukulele and a mandolin.
Right. It's probably like an NPR tote bag or from some sort of like lefty organization.
Yeah, Parish Review, Mother Jones, you pick. And maybe there's a labubu in one of them.
I still haven't exactly learned what a labubu is, and I don't want it explained to me. I know it involves cute, wide-eyed creatures of some kind. Anyway, I guess the question that we want to ask, first of all, is like, is this a real trend or is this a thing being cooked up by, things like this piece in the New York Times and these contests that are happening in places? Or is it embodying real anxieties, or is it something that's just a silly, playful mode of understanding gender? And like, what does it say about, this is where I'm glad that we have a queer person on the panel this week. What does it say about the state of straightness that in 2025 we're making fun of people who are not performing their gender in the most, I don't know, I guess, cliched way? I mean, as some of the best writing that I've read on this and in prepping this segment has pointed out, like, aren't the guys who are listening to Andrew Tate and lifting and being bros on YouTube also obviously performing masculinity?
Right.
I mean, isn't anybody who gets up and puts on vaguely male-coded clothing and goes out into the world performing masculinity in some way? And what does it mean that there's this anxiety in particular around this trend right now?
I don't know. I'm fascinated by the way the circle just keeps closing on itself with respect to what men are allowed to be and do. And I find it interesting that the default assumption I glean from this performative male, quote, problem, unquote, is that the default masculinity is the one that's the opposite of these like so-called feminized men, right? That it is the sort of manospheric man. It's hilarious to me that this is like sort of ideological training wheels for young people. Like, a kind of cosplay to figure out what about maleness, masculinity, and being a woman, right? Like femininity feels right and good. There's no value attached to these performances. But at the same time, I guess if I'm extrapolating outward, what happens once these guys get these women, if this is really a thing, right? Like you've quote, performed maleness, unquote, and then you've gotten this woman. But what happens like after a week of this relationship and she finds out that you are like one of these Andrew Tate, Joe Roganistas.
Right. And also, like, are there any other options about like ways that a man could be or things that a man could like?
That's what I'm saying, right? Like, I mean, it's like they're figuring out a thing that it's forestalling all kinds of developments. Now, I know that the contests are sort of done in the spirit of satire.
It's still reinforcing the boundary, though. Yeah. Okay, we need Steve to jump in here because he is the straight man among us. He has to help us understand who is performing what.
Yeah.
What's going on.
What a laugh.
After a lifetime of performing sensitivity, right? I think I could speak to this.
Yeah, mask off,
subject.
Steve.
I mean,
we know your real proclivities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, seething worms underneath. Yeah. So I had so many responses to this. One is that it's like kind of almost like a horseshoe theory of feminism in a way, because this is exactly what toxic men would say about a certain kind of man, which I correlate to, but across a pretty big generational divide. I mean, a sort of significant one because much of this is not legible to me at all.
What's not legible to you? The actual performance?
Well, I just thought, like, I don't know, like just the specific accoutrements, right?
Sure.
And the ways in which they've come to signify something to other people. But it also shows like the degree to which social media has turned everyone into a kind of, social performer, and the semiotics of selfhood have overwhelmed what used to be thought of as selfhood itself to a degree. And so here's where I kind of, come out on it. I love the RuPaul quote, right? We're all born naked, the rest is drag, which I agree with. Many of the people putting on and participating in this, sensitive man satire endorse the RuPaul quote. So what are they actually satirizing, right? So it seems to suggest that there's one set of behavioral choices involving style and taste as signifiers, right? And another, but that actually masks someone who's not kind, decent, thoughtful, and when necessary, self-sacrificing, right? So it is kind of getting at a mode of inauthenticity, right? So it's not just the rest is drag, right? That kind of cuts against it. In other words, there is a thing in itself that one ought to be authentic to that one isn't, which makes these signifiers grotesquely hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I can make all of that cohere, but right, like the whole point of it, the reason why it's satirical is that it's an other directed performance. Like what's being anticipated is what a certain kind of woman will want me to be. It doesn't come from something authentic, and it's manipulative because once I've duped a woman into believing I'm this kind of male, I will have a certain kind of power over her that's that's somehow manipulative.
Still in line with this whole other power structure.
Right. And so I can't quite puzzle those two things out. Is everything drag, or are some things importantly not drag and some things are drag? Like this is where I sort of get lost.
Can I just say this whole thing seems like an overheated, sloppy 2025 media souffle? Like there is just so, like, as far as I could tell from reading through our prep for this, the actual origin of this is that on the dating apps, some men read Joan Didion and have tote bags and don't just hold up fish and show their pecs and pound beers or something. And that online and on social video, people have started like scrutinizing this type of guy, because sometimes this type of guy is a different type of guy that you might want to date. And sometimes this type of guy is just pretending to be this type of guy to lure you. But there isn't even that much evidence that that's like real, that there really are that many people who are actually my experience with the Andrew Tate listeners of the world is not that they give a fuck about trying to lure the kind of women who wouldn't want them to be Andrew Tates.
Right.
Like, they're looking for different women anyway.
Right.
Like, the grist for this puffery is so slight, and essentially what it is like a generation of young people trying to suss out their thoughts on the fact that masculinity is a performance, and there's different stripes of it, and there's different ways to be it. And these profiles seem to have been the genesis of this thinking, which like every generation goes through and thinks about, or at least every generation in the last, since however long we've been thinking about gender as a performance or a social construct or whatever. I believe I've told the story on this podcast before of the gender studies class I briefly took and then dropped at college my freshman year, where I went in on the shopping day and the teacher's first line was, "What is gender?" And some woman stood up and was like, "A social construct." And the professor was like, "And what does it define?" And the woman still standing was like, "Dominance and subordination." And I was like, I'm gonna go find a different class. Not that that's not true, but there was a polemical quality to the vibe.
Talk about a performance.
And great, good for them that they're figuring it out. I know many men in my lives who sincerely read Joan Didion and find tote bags to be a convenient, cheap means of conveyance that if you lose them, it's not too big of a problem unless it's one of the really good ones from McNally Jackson with that chic logo. But I also have met the kind of like suspiciously thirsty women's studies major who seems like he's curious about it because it's a mechanism he's determined to make himself whatever, to like get with girls or get with, like there are people like that. You encounter them every so often. This seems like another generation figuring that out. And then there's like 1,000 dumb articles about it. It just seems like nothing to me. Am I an idiot? Is there actually something new?
No,
here?
I just think this is the end of the cycle that began around this. At some point, like that moment in 2012, 2013, our sort of woke bay moment, where there was a performance of white maleness that corresponded to being good by aligning yourself with a social cause, right? And that was something that women were celebrating, right? Like, in the olden times when Twitter was still, not this kind of toxic. That was a thing that people were celebrating, was like, look at my woke bae brought me breakfast. My woke bae knows who, John Lewis is. And I think that this performative male moment that people think we're having, this summer, I don't know, it's correspondent to all these other kinds of summers like that we've had. Maybe there's probably some things before like the woke bae period that we once were in. And I feel this is how we wind up with something like the manosphere, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that, you know what's never going to change? Just having a bunch of guys just support me for just being whatever the fuck I am. Or I'll just be whatever the fuck they are and it'll be fine. Y'all can judge me all you want and make fun of like what I'm doing or not doing. But you know who's always going to love me and support me? These guys.
You know what? All of philosophy is a footnote to Plato, and all of these discussions are a footnote to Hannah Rosen's The End of Men. Men just don't know how to be themselves anymore. They don't know what's real. They don't know what's performance. This is painting with a very broad brush, but there was something trenchant and highly prescient about her argument.
No, thanks for
vis-a-vis masculinity and performative masculinity, and we're still in that. That is the larger arc of this conversation. That can't find a resolution so that it ends.
All right, well, we circled around it. We flailed in proximity to it. I'm not sure that we completely understand what performative masculinity is or if it's a real thing, but I enjoyed that conversation.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
New season, new chaos in college football.
Let's go! Big stage, big opportunity.
This Labor Day weekend, the wildness lives on ABC, ESPN, and the all-new ESPN app.
What a way to start!
Featuring top 10 teams like Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, and LSU, and Bill Belichick's debut at North Carolina.
It's so special when these teams collide.
Don't miss a lineup filled with electric matchups.
Welcome back to college football.
Kickoff week presented by Modelo. Labor Day weekend on ESPN and ABC. Also available to stream on the all-new ESPN app.
And now we have reached the moment in the show when we endorse. Steve, I'm going to start with you because I feel like we haven't heard enough from you in this show, and you always start with me. So payback. What have you got to endorse this week?
Okay, very, very, very quickly, I have created a playlist of piano-led trios, jazz trios. The show's favorite, Red Garland, is not featured that heavily on it because I was looking for people I wasn't familiar with, and I found a pianist who I loved, Bobo Stenson. I think he's definitely Scandinavian. I think he's Swedish, and I place him next to Marcin Wasilewski, a Polish pianist. You know, they're all sort of children and grandchildren of Bill Evans. So Esbjorn Svensson, who's unfortunately deceased, he was brilliant. He was probably the best heir, maybe, to Evans. But I mean, just a bunch of others that I really love, like this guy Eric Legnini. I mean, they're just a bunch of them, and they're somewhat obscure. But Bobo Stenson is a wonderful, wonderful musician. I cannot recommend him highly enough. And we'll link to a couple of my favorite albums of his.
That is an automatic bookmark for me. Any Steve Jazz
I'm
piano
ready
rack
for
goes straight to the dial.
I listen to my Red Garland playlist all the time. Steve, you've really changed my jazz listening life with that recommendation.
Oh, I'm so proud.
I quite sincerely, even though we hyped it at the top, am going to endorse Cannonball. Wesley, this show is so fun.
Thank you.
I really love it. And one particular episode I would point people to, because we didn't get around to it on our show, is your discussion with Taffy Brodesser Ackner of And Just Like That, which tragically you recorded before the revelation that And Just Like That, the follow-up TV show to Sex and the City, was being canceled. And perhaps Carrie Bradshaw has ended her time on this earth with us, although I don't fucking believe it. They're going to do a movie with these characters. There's no way they don't.
I'm with you. I just feel like this will never end.
They just are living their lives, and we're just going to keep checking in on them at some point. I'm ready for the Samantha spinoff movie. But that is a rich text, And Just Like That. I have watched every minute of it, and Steve and Dana have not. We did not discuss it here, but there's a great convo about the appeal of that show and what some of the backlash to that show was. And as someone who's also going to miss that show, even though I was kind of hate watching it and kind of really watching
So many
it for
people
fun,
feel this way.
there was some ridiculosity in it, and some
For sure.
and some marvelousness in it as well, and some new characters who really came into their own over time. Anyway, it's one topic a week with a different, intriguing critic guest, and all of Wesley's typical brilliance,
At some point,
fun
it's gonna be
clips,
y'all.
and oh yeah, well I'm waiting for my call, Wesley, but it's great. It's just a great show. I'm so glad it exists. I'm so glad you're doing it, and if you like our show, you should check out Wesley's show, Cannonball.
Thank you.
All right, Wesley, it's over to you. What have you got to endorse?
Oh, it's U.S. Open time. It's my favorite time of the year where, you get 2 weeks of New York tennis. All the best tennis players show up in New York and try to win, a series of titles. And I don't know, it just makes me, it's like the beginning of fall. It's the end of summer. And, tennis is my sport, my favorite sport. And already we've gotten one big upset. Madison Keys is gone. She somehow managed to commit 79 unforced errors in a tennis match. I didn't know you could do that, but it's doable. And she won the Australian Open at the beginning of the year. And you just thought, this is a new person. She's figured it out. But, she's wrestling with some stuff. Anyway, the other thing that happened that was great was that Carlos Alcaraz shaved his head. And Dana, does this mean anything to you?
No, you can tell from my face.
I'm just looking at Dana being like, what language is he speaking? But this is just, the thing about the U.S. Open that I find culturally fascinating is that for some reason, it is such a signifier of having done something for people. Like the merch of the Open has become, I don't want to say more important to people than the tennis, but I just think that the merch aspect of having gone out to Queens to watch the tournament has sort of superseded the game, the matches themselves. But I don't know. I'm still not mad at all the people who just go out there to buy a hat. And it's just that time of year. It makes me really happy. And I am assuming that Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz will get to the men's final, and at the women's final, you just can't really say. But I assume Aryna Sabalenka will definitely be one of the people in the final.
What I was going to say is the one thing I know about the Open is it's when you discover new celebrity couples. It's always like, wait, Timmy's dating Kylie or whatever. I don't know. I'm getting it wrong. But
That's
those people show up in the stands.
Like seeing your not favorite stars and some of your favorite stars at the matches themselves is also kind of wonderful. Dana, why don't you tell us what you're endorsing?
I shall, Wesley, I shall. In fact, it's something that I already mentioned in our highest to lowest segment. I mean, this is very, very basic of me, but High and Low, the 1963 Kurosawa movie, is unquestionably the best cultural thing that I experienced over the past week. I hadn't seen it in a good 20 years, so I rewatched it before seeing the Spike Lee movie. Possibly a mistake. I should have watched it after because it's very, very hard. I have to say, it is setting the bar insanely high for yourself to say, I'll just remake High and Low, the 1963 Kurosawa classic, because that is pretty much a perfect movie. Mm-hmm. It's one of those movies where at every second of watching it, you're utterly enthralled by the artistry, right? There's a part of you that's saying, like, look at the blocking, look at the way the camera just moved, right? Yeah. I mean, the bravura, right, is constantly in one part of your mind, but then you're also completely caught up in the thriller plot, in the suspense of it all. Are they going to save the kid? It's extremely tight, as I mentioned in our segment, even though it's 2 hours and 20 minutes long or so. It just goes by in a flash and has moments where you gasp at both the filmmaking and at the developments in the story. And it also asks those questions about high and low, and those questions about income inequality and injustice in such a profound and deep way. Sort of exactly what, to go to the non-Spike Lee movie we were talking about, sort of exactly what I feel like Weapons didn't do, which is like, okay, this is a story of suspense and the thrill of what's going to happen to these particular people, but it also has these tentacles that reach, out into every part of our social world and make me think about, so many issues that are never even mentioned in the movie. The High and Low Kurosawa does that just so beautifully.
And it's mentioning. It's also got a great ending.
Oh, fantastic
ending. The end
ending.
of High and Low is one of the great endings.
Absolutely fantastic ending that brings together the two halves of the movie. I won't get too far into it because I like this to be a surprise as you're watching. But yeah, the first half and the second half of this movie seem like they're completely different movies, yet they are knitted together and make complete sense. And that final scene, the confrontation between villain and hero, just ties it all up in this incredible bundle. Anyway, you could not have a more satisfying film watching experience. So turn out the lights, turn off the other screens, eliminate the distractions, and watch High and Low. All right, well, we've reached the end of this episode. You'll find links to some of the things we talked about on our show page, slate.com/culturefest. You can always write us at culturefest@slate.com. Our producer is Benjamin Frisch, our production assistant is Daniel Hirsch, and the composer of our theme music is Nicholas Pertel. The executive producer of Slate Podcasts is Mia Lobel. For Julia Turner, Stephen Metcalf, and Wesley Morris, I'm Dana Stevens saying thanks so much for being a listener, and we'll talk to you all again next week.
I'm Chris Hadfield, astronaut and citizen of planet Earth. Join me on a journey into the systems that power the world. No politics, just real conversations with real people shaping the future of energy.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.